Hello viewers, my name is Anver Rigimsude, a faculty member in the Department of Mass Communication, Skyline University, Nigeria. And today we'll be looking at another interesting topic in research, which is literature review. Now, as a researcher, literature review is fundamental. It is essential to you as a researcher because for you to be able to undertake any study, you need to avail yourself to relevant literature that will help you to identify the missing gap in the existing literature. So you need literature review so that you can be able to review them, then ascertain the way forward as how you can be able to investigate a particular subject matter. So you need to expose yourself to literature review. And it is on this note that we are going to look at some of the steps that are involved in conducting a literature review. Now, the first step, search for relevant literature on your topic. Now, as a researcher, after you might have identified a problem that you want to solve, then you need literature that can address that particular problem. Literature that are somewhat related to that particular study you are trying to investigate. So you need to search for literature that has direct bearing to the subject matter. Literature that are somewhat relevant to the topic. Here you can use maybe perhaps Google Scholar and other search engines for you to be able to locate literature that can help you to undertake that particular study. It's not just anyhow literature. You need to look at literature that can add value, literature that can help you to identify the missing gap in the literature, literature that can help you to answer your research questions or the objectives of the study. The second step is evaluate and select topics. Once you have identified these literature that are relevant to your subject matter, you need to evaluate them. Look at the consistency in such literature and then see how the literature you select can be able to address the problem at hand. So after you have assembled this literature, then you make sense out of the ones that you have assembled. It's not every literature that you have exposed yourself to that automatically constitute part of the study. No, you have to be selective, and that is why you need to evaluate such literature. You need to interrogate literature. You need to examine whether such literature are apparent as far as your topic is concerned. The next thing, identify the themes, debates, and gaps. Now, after you have selected literature that has direct bearing to your subject matter, first you need to look at some of the thematic areas. If you are undertaking a particular study, you need to look at some of the things that emerge in the course of your readings. What are the major issues that other scholars have also highlighted as far as that topic is concerned? That should be your concern. Another thing is debates. What are the existing literature saying? What are communication scholars saying as far as that topic is concerned? So you need to look at recent debates. For example, maybe studies that are conducted in 2022. We are in 2022. So you need recent arguments by scholars. What are they saying about that particular topic you are investigating? So you look at recent trends as far as the topic is concerned. And the last one is the missing gaps. Now, the fundamental aspect of literature is the missing gap. And when we talk of missing gap, these are the lacunas. These are the things that prompted a researcher to embark on a particular study. If you are going to embark on a particular study, you need a gap because there must be a particular gap that exists in the literature that you need to fill it up. So you cannot get this gap until you interrogate the literature, until you read and examine the recent debates in the literature. What is that thing that previous studies or other researchers have not actually captured in their studies? That should be your focus. That could be a major gap that you want to fill it up in the course of your study. Step 4, outline your literature review structure based on these 4 parameters or criteria. Number 1, the chronological order. Now, as a researcher, the first thing is look at how this literature has been structured. Now, go for the recent literature. If you are conducting a study, you need recent literature because that will expose you to current debates as far as that topic is concerned. So you start with current literature, maybe you moved on to the next until you exhaust them. And make sure that your literature is substantially and adequately examined. You start from maybe 2020 studies, go down to 2021, 2020, 2019 in that order. Then that will give you the chronological order in terms of structuring your literature. The next thing is the thematic literature. Sometimes you need to review your literature based on themes that emerge in the course of your study. Maybe, for example, you look at the objectives of your study. What are those things that constitute part of your objectives? Then based on that, you can develop themes. You can develop subjects or concepts based on those themes, and then you can be able to examine them in the course of your review. The next thing is methodological approach. As a researcher, if you are reviewing literature, you need to also look at some of the methods adopted by previous studies. Look at which research instrument they have used in their studies. So if, for example, you are working on a particular studies and most of the studies in those areas are maybe using perhaps content analysis, for example, or they are using survey, for example, that is an indication to you as a researcher that the appropriate method for that particular study is content analysis. If you are doing a study and you discover that most of the literature review maybe they are using survey method, for example, then that should be maybe a pointer to you as a researcher that the appropriate method for this particular study is survey. The next thing is theoretical review. As a researcher, you also need to examine some of the theories that are often adopted by other researchers in the area. And if you are reviewing this theory, you look at who are the propounders of this theory, in what year that particular theory was established or was articulated. You look at what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses of such theories. Then you can be able to review such literature and then identify a particular theory that will anchor your study. Most of the times, researchers tend to find it somewhat difficult to identify a particular theory that will address their research question. It is quite simple. In the course of reviewing literature review, you also need to undertake a section of theoretical review, where you review a number of theories and then you identify some of this theory that can be able to serve your study goal. And within that context, you can be able to identify a particular theory that will best answer your research question. Now, the last step is get writing. Here you should consider the following tips. 1. Conceptual review. Basically, literature review has 3 components: conceptual review, empirical review, and theoretical review. At the level of conceptual review, basically the researcher is expected to look at some of the concepts that are very important to that particular topic, and what are the scholars in that particular area saying as far as those concepts are concerned. Here you look at maybe scholarly definition in terms of digesting the concepts. You look at what scholars are saying as far as that concepts are concerned. Now, you do a kind of a conceptual review. Now, after which you look at the empirical review. And when we talk of empirical review, these are basically studies that have been conducted in a particular area. Here you are interested in previous studies that have been done in that very area that you are conducting your study. And the aim is to look at existing studies, not anyhow studies, study that has direct bearing to the subject matter. If Mr. ABC conducted a similar study in that area, then you can also review their study. What method do they use? What are their research findings? What are their recommendations? What are their conclusions? So that will serve as a base for you as a researcher. Now you review such literature, and then you can be able to see how such literature can be able to help you to answer your objectives in your study. And the last one is theoretical review. Sometimes as a researcher, if you are conducting a study, you need to review a number of theories. Maybe, for example, you can review up to 10 theories or 5 theories, but at the end of the study, your study can anchor on one particular theory or 2 theories that can help you to answer either your research question or objectives of the study. So basically, literature review is very important. Literature review is fundamental because for you to be able to undertake any research, you need literature review, because it is literature review that will direct you. They serve as kicker in kicking you into that particular subject that you are trying to investigate. But most of the times, you find out that sometimes people tend to just be doing what is called stand-alone literature by simply quoting scholars. According to maybe Morel 2020 conducted a study on this particular issue. This is his research method, this is his finding, this is the research instrument, this is his conclusion and recommendation, and then they move on to another one. That is simply called stand-alone literature. It has no connection. There is no nexus between the previous studies and the current study. So as a researcher, you need to interrogate the literature. You need to ask yourself, what is the connection between the previous study that I have reviewed to the current studies? What is that thing, that relationship? What is binding the existing studies and the current study? You need to create that room for you to be able to establish that relationship. So, and you cannot do this until when you read and understand the strength of those literature. You read and understand the recent arguments. You read and understand what are the literature in that particular area saying as far as this study is concerned. So if you are able to do this, then you can be able to establish the nexus that exists between the previous studies and the current study. That is, if you are doing that, you are doing a very good literature review. But by merely assembling literature without interrogating literature, you are not doing literature review. You are simply doing copy and paste. And such literature has nothing to do with the current study, because it will be quite challenging for you to identify a missing gap when you are not interrogating the literature. I hope you are able to take home 1 or 2 things in this class. Thank you very much.